March 15, 1952. Manhattan Criminal Court, Room 304. One sentence. 4 minutes. 40,000 people moved in silence. By nightfall, a top New York lawyer was finished, without a punch thrown. This wasn't revenge or anger, but a surgical demonstration of power. So how did Bumpy Johnson erase a man's life in plain sight? To understand the end, we have to return to that moment in court. May 15, 1952. Manhattan Criminal Court, Room 304. The air smelled like old wood and stale cigarette smoke, the kind of smell that soaked into the walls over decades of men lying under oath and judges pretending to believe them. Bumpy Johnson sat at the defendant's table wearing a suit that cost more than most men made in 3 months, his hands folded on the table in front of him, his face showing nothing while his lawyer argued a motion to dismiss charges that everyone in the room knew were built on lies and paid testimony. Richard Whitmore stood 15 feet away, one of the top criminal defense attorneys in New York, a man who had spent 20 years putting mobsters back on the street and getting paid in cash that never appeared on any tax form. He was defending a client accused of running a protection racket in Harlem, and Whitmore had decided the best strategy was not to argue the facts, but to attack Bumpy's character, to make the jury believe that anything a black gangster said was automatically a lie because men like Bumpy were not capable of telling the truth. Whitmore turned to face the judge, his voice loud enough to fill the courtroom, confident in the way that men get confident when they believe the system will protect them no matter what comes out of their mouth. Your Honor, we are being asked to take the word of a man who operates in the jungle, who lives by jungle rules, who has no concept of civilized society or law. This is not a credible witness. This is a monkey in a suit pretending to be a human being. The courtroom went silent. Not the kind of silence that comes from shock, the kind that comes from everyone holding their breath and waiting to see what happens next. Judge Harrison sat behind the bench and said nothing, did not bang his gavel, did not tell Whitmore to watch his language, just sat there like he had not heard anything worth correcting. The prosecutor, a man named Douglas Mitchell, who had built his career on putting black men in prison for crimes white men committed, looked down at his papers and pretended to be reading something important. 30 reporters sat in the gallery. 17 of them were black, worked for newspapers that served Harlem, papers that white Manhattan pretended did not exist. They did not gasp, did not shout, just wrote down every word Whitmore said, exactly as he said it, because they understood that the truth did not need embellishment. It just needed to be recorded and delivered to the people who would know what to do with it. From somewhere down the hallway, a phonograph played in a clerk's office. Duke Ellington's Mood Indigo. The sound drifted through the door, distorted and thin, the horns bending wrong, the piano out of tune, like something beautiful being strangled slowly while everyone pretended not to notice. That sound was the perfect soundtrack for what was happening in this courtroom. Truth being suffocated. Dignity being murdered. Justice being buried alive while the people in power watched and did nothing. Bumpy stood up, slow. His chair scraped against the floor, the sound cutting through the silence like a blade dragged across stone. The bailiff's hand moved to his service revolver, fingers touching the grip, ready to draw if Bumpy took one step in the wrong direction. Every eye in the room locked on Bumpy, waiting for the explosion, waiting for him to lunge across the courtroom and put his hands around Whitmore's throat and squeeze until the lawyer's face turned purple and his eyes rolled back. Bumpy did not move toward Whitmore, did not raise his voice, did not curse. Just looked at the lawyer the way you look at a dog that bit you and is about to learn what happens to dogs that bite. Then he spoke, his voice quiet, cold, the kind of cold that comes from a man who has decided exactly how someone is going to suffer and is simply informing them of the decision. Say it like a man. 4 words. That was all. The courtroom froze. Whitmore's face flushed red. Judge Harrison's hand twitched toward his gavel, but stopped halfway. The prosecutor looked up from his papers for the first time. The reporters kept writing. Bumpy sat back down, did not break eye contact with Whitmore, just stared at him with the kind of stare that said, "I am going to erase you from this city, and you will never understand how it happened until it is already done." Whitmore tried to recover, cleared his throat, adjusted his tie, looked at the judge for support that did not come. "Your Honor, the defendant is attempting to intimidate this court." Judge Harrison finally spoke. "Mr. Johnson, do not interrupt proceedings again." Not a word to Whitmore, not a reprimand, not an acknowledgement that anything inappropriate had been said. Just a warning to the black man in the room to stay quiet and accept whatever treatment came his way. Bumpy nodded, said nothing, sat perfectly still. But everyone who knew him understood that the stillness was not submission. It was calculation. It was a predator going motionless before the strike, measuring distance, waiting for the exact right moment to move. Whitmore made his mistake in that moment, though he did not know it yet. His mistake was not calling Bumpy those words. Men had called Bumpy worse and lived to regret it, but lived nonetheless. Whitmore's real mistake was thinking that Bumpy was alone in that courtroom, that the insult had been delivered in a vacuum where no one would care and nothing would happen, because this was a white man's building, in a white man's city, and white men could say whatever they wanted without consequence. But Bumpy was not alone. He was never alone. 17 reporters were writing down every word. 42,000 union members were about to hear what happened in this room. Every porter, every waiter, every janitor, every cook, every driver in Manhattan who had been called the same words and had to smile and say yes, sir, and take it because fighting back meant losing your job and your livelihood and maybe your life. They were all about to hear that Richard Whitmore had said those words out loud in a court of law, and the system had protected him, and they were going to respond. Not with fists, not with guns, not with broken windows or burning cars, with something far more devastating than violence, with silence, with absence, with the coordinated withdrawal of every service, every courtesy, every basic human interaction that made life in Manhattan possible. They were going to erase Richard Whitmore from the city without laying a hand on him, and by the time he understood what was happening, it would be too late to apologize or beg or buy his way back into a world that had decided he no longer existed. Fools believe that words have no consequences. Smart men know that consequences always arrive before the fist has time to swing. And Richard Whitmore, for all his law degrees and courtroom victories and expensive suits, was about to learn that lesson in the hardest way possible. The court session ended at 9:43. Judge Harrison banged his gavel and walked out like nothing had happened, like the air had not just been poisoned with words that would get a black man killed if he said them about a white lawyer. Whitmore shook hands with his client, collected his papers, walked toward the exit with the confidence of a man who thought he had just won something. The 17 black reporters stayed seated, did not rush to phones, just sat writing in their notebooks, pencils moving steady, recording every word Whitmore said, the exact phrasing, the silence from the judge, the prosecutor looking away, the bailiff reaching for his gun when Bumpy stood but doing nothing when Whitmore called a man a monkey in open court. They finished writing, stood up, walked out single file. No conversation. They knew what to do next because they had been waiting for a moment this clear, this undeniable, this impossible to ignore. By 10:15, Marcus Gaines from the Amsterdam News called his editor from a payphone outside the courthouse. Printed exactly as I say it. Word for word, no changes. Go ahead. Richard Whitmore, attorney for the defense, stated in open court. This is a monkey in a suit pretending to be a human being. Judge Harrison said nothing. Prosecutor Mitchell looked down. 6 bailiffs stood silent. 13 white reporters present. None will print this story. Jesus Christ, Marcus. Do not add Jesus Christ. Just print what I said. Get runners on the street by 10:30. Every corner from 110th to 155th. I want 40,000 people to know before lunch. It is already being typed. The line went dead. By 10:30, young men were handing out single-sheet bulletins on every corner in Harlem. The bulletin did not editorialize, just printed Whitmore's words in bold type at the top, followed by the names of everyone who stayed silent. By 11:15, 40,000 people knew. They did not march, did not gather in the streets, did not shout or break windows. They just absorbed the information like water soaking into concrete, silent and deep, spreading through every crack. Bumpy left the courthouse at 11:20, got into a car driven by Tommy Chen, rode in silence to a phone booth on 125th Street. Got out, dropped a nickel. Dialed. Brotherhood office. Philip, this is Bumpy. A. Philip Randolph ran the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, 42,000 men who worked trains, hotels, kitchens, every service job that kept Manhattan running. His voice stayed calm. I already heard. Everyone has heard. Good. Then you know what I am asking. Silence for 5 seconds. Then, you understand what this means. If we do this, it is not for a day. Not until he apologizes. It is until he is gone. Completely gone. Out of the city. Out of the profession. Erased. That is exactly what I am asking. How far? Every restaurant, every taxi, every elevator, every hotel, every shoe shine, every door that opens in this city, I want it closed in his face. I want him to climb stairs in a $1,000 suit because nobody will run the elevator for him. I want him to walk home because no cab will stop. I want him to eat alone because every table empties when he sits down. I want 48 hours where he learns what it feels like to not exist. Randolph exhaled slow. That is not revenge. That is execution. Call it whatever helps you sleep. Will you do it? I will make the calls. Give me 2 hours. By the time Whitmore walks into his regular lunch spot, every member will know his face. And if someone asks why, we do not explain. We just stop seeing him. Man wants to call people monkeys in a courtroom. He can live in a jungle by himself. See how long he lasts. Bumpy hung up, got back in the car, lit a cigarette. Tommy drove without asking where they were going. Just drove while Bumpy watched the city pass by. Streets crowded with people who did not know yet that the next 48 hours would rewrite the rules. At 11:45, Randolph sat in his office with a list of phone numbers and started dialing. Each call lasted less than 2 minutes. Each person he called made 5 more calls. By noon, every member of the Brotherhood knew Richard Whitmore's name, knew what he looked like, knew where he worked, knew where he ate lunch. One porter named Samuel, the same man who worked the Carlton Arms elevator, got the call at 11:53. Listened. Hung up. Turned to 3 other porters in the break room. Richard Whitmore, defense attorney, called Bumpy Johnson a monkey in court this morning. Judge said nothing. We are done serving him. Pass it on. Done how? Done like he does not exist. He gets in your elevator, you do not see him. He tries to get a cab, you are off duty. He walks into a restaurant, you walk out. Everybody walks out. We do not explain. We do not argue. We just remove ourselves from his presence until he understands that words have consequences. For how long? Until he is gone. The 3 porters nodded, made their own calls. By noon, the entire network knew. Waiters, drivers, doormen, cooks, janitors. Every black man working a service job in Manhattan had the same information and the same instructions. And they were ready. Not angry. Not vengeful. just ready to execute a decision that had already been made, the kind that does not get reversed because someone apologizes or offers money or begs. In a small chapel on 132nd Street, an old woman named Claudette sat in the back pew, the bulletin folded in her coat pocket, wind cutting through the door cracks cold enough to freeze prayers before they reached the ceiling. She had been asking God for 32 years to protect her sons, to let them live in a world where being called an animal had consequences for the person doing the calling. She did not pray for protection anymore. She prayed for what was coming. She prayed that every door stayed closed, every table stayed empty, every elevator stayed broken. She prayed for silence so complete that Richard Whitmore would hear his own heartbeat and understand that he was alone in a city of 8 million people. And that loneliness was not an accident. It was a sentence. Information does not need to be shouted. It just needs to reach the right ears. The ears of men who serve food, drive taxis, run elevators, wash dishes, press suits, carry luggage, open doors without ever looking you in the eye because looking a white man in the eye could get them fired or killed. Those men heard, and they remembered, and they made a decision that Richard Whitmore would never see coming, because men like him did not believe people like them had any power at all. By noon, 42,000 men knew, and Richard Whitmore had 90 minutes left before he walked into a restaurant and discovered that the world had changed while he was not paying attention. Delmonico Restaurant on Madison Avenue, the kind of place where prosecutors and defense attorneys ate lunch together and made deals over veal and scotch, where your table placement told everyone in the room whether you were rising or already dead and just had not figured it out yet. Richard Whitmore walked through the front door at 12:32. Same time he walked through that door every Friday for 8 years. He nodded at Jerome, the black maitre d' who had been seating him at the best table in the house since 1941. Jerome looked at Whitmore, did not smile, did not nod, did not say, "Good afternoon, counselor," just stood there holding menus like Whitmore was a ghost he could see through. Whitmore stopped. "My usual table, Jerome." Jerome's face stayed flat as concrete. "I do not see you, sir." "What the hell are you talking about?" "I do not see you." Jerome set the menus down, turned his back, walked toward the kitchen without another word. Whitmore's jaw tightened. He stood there for 3 seconds, feeling heat crawl up his neck, then decided Jerome was out of his goddamn mind and walked into the dining room himself. 42 people sat eating, lawyers, judges, mobsters pretending to be businessmen, the usual Friday feeding. He walked toward his table near the window. 3 prosecutors from the DA's office sat at the table next to it, men he had shared drinks with last month, men who laughed at his jokes and called him Dick like they were friends. One of them saw Whitmore coming, leaned over, whispered. All 3 stood up immediately, dropped cash on the table, left their food half-eaten, walked straight toward the exit without looking at him, walked past him like he was furniture, like he was a potted plant blocking the aisle. A waiter came out of the kitchen carrying a tray loaded with plates, saw Whitmore standing in the middle of the room, stopped dead, turned around, walked back into the kitchen with the food still on the tray. Something cold slid into Whitmore's gut. He looked around the room. More people were standing, a table of 4 near the bar, 2 men in the corner, a woman by herself at the window. They stood, dropped money, grabbed coats, moved toward the door in silence. No explanations, no apologies, just bodies evacuating like someone had yelled fire and only certain people could hear it. 90 seconds. That was how long it took for 31 people to empty out of that restaurant. The door kept opening and closing, and every time it swung shut, the room got colder, deader, more like a tomb. The 11 white customers who stayed sat frozen at their tables, forks halfway to their mouths, understanding just enough to know that getting up and leaving right now would put them on the wrong side of something they wanted no part of. Whitmore stood alone in the center of the dining room. 42 people eating lunch 2 minutes ago. Now it was a morgue full of abandoned meals, plates with food rotting on them, glasses with wine turning warm. On the table closest to him, someone had left a bottle of Barolo, 1934, sitting open, maybe 4 ounces poured, the rest exposed to air, going to vinegar. Wasted. The smell hit him, sharp and bitter, the smell of money thrown away because staying 1 more minute was not worth the cost. Whitmore walked back to Jerome. His voice came out harder now, the courtroom voice, the voice that made witnesses crack. "What the hell is this?" Jerome stared past him at the door, would not make eye contact. "I do not see you, sir. Cannot help someone I do not see. You are looking right at me." "No, sir. Looking at the door, waiting for real customers. I am a goddamn customer. 8 years I have been coming here. I do not see you." Whitmore's fists clenched hard enough his knuckles cracked. "You know who I am? You know what I can do to this place? 1 call to the health inspector and this shithole gets shut down for a month." Jerome finally looked at him, dead in the eyes. No fear, no anger, just the look of a man who had already made up his mind and was not going to waste breath explaining. "I know exactly who you are, Mr. Whitmore. I know what you said in court this morning. I know what you called a man in front of a judge who let you say it. That is why I do not see you. That is why nobody in this restaurant sees you. That is why you need to get the fuck out before you embarrass yourself worse than you already have. This is discrimination. I will have your job." "No, sir. Discrimination is refusing service based on skin color. This is refusing service based on you being a piece of shit. Big difference. Now leave." Whitmore looked around the room 1 more time. The 11 white customers stared at their plates like staring hard enough would make them invisible. The kitchen had gone silent. No dishes clattering. No voices. No sounds of a restaurant operating. Just dead air, like the whole building had stopped breathing the second he walked in. He turned and headed for the door. His shoes hit the marble floor like gunshots, each step echoing through the empty space loud enough that he felt like the entire block could hear him walking alone through a room that had been packed 2 minutes earlier. He shoved through the door onto Madison Avenue and the sunlight hammered him, bright and brutal, putting him on display on the sidewalk while businessmen and secretaries walked past without looking, without slowing, without giving a single damn that something had just happened. Whitmore stood there. 4 minutes. Just stood on that sidewalk trying to piece together how lunch at his regular spot had turned into a public skinning without anyone laying a hand on him. And in those 4 minutes, his entire life shifted on its axis. He did not understand it yet, did not realize that what just happened at Delmonico was happening right now at every restaurant, every cab stand, every elevator, every building in Manhattan where someone black worked a job that involved serving white people. Did not understand that 42,000 men had just erased him from the city and there was not a lawyer alive who could argue him back into existence. 4 minutes, that was all it took. 4 minutes standing alone on a sidewalk in the middle of Manhattan. And Richard Whitmore's career was already circling the drain. He just did not know he was drowning yet. But he would. By tonight he would know. By tomorrow he would be begging. And by Monday, he would be gone. When a room rejects you, that is not isolation. That is a death sentence handed down without a trial. And the execution had already started. Whitmore left Delmonico and walked 3 blocks trying to process what had just happened, trying to convince himself it was a coincidence. A bad day, something that would make sense once he had time to think. He walked into Russo's on 47th Street, another place he ate regularly, another place where the owner knew his name and saved him a table. The owner, a fat Italian named Carlo who had been feeding lawyers and mobsters for 30 years, saw Whitmore walk in and immediately turned his back, walked into the kitchen, did not say a word. The hostess, a young black woman, looked at Whitmore with eyes colder than a February river. "We are full." Whitmore looked at the dining room. 8 empty tables. "You are not full. I can see empty tables from here." "We are full for you. Leave." He left, walked to another restaurant, same thing. Walked to a third. The maitre d' told him they had a gas leak and were closing early. Walked to a fourth. The door was locked. He could see people eating inside, could see waiters moving between tables. But when he knocked on the glass, the manager came over and flipped the sign to closed without opening the door. By 2:30, Whitmore was sweating through his shirt despite the cold March air. He stood on the corner of Lexington Avenue trying to flag a cab. 7 cabs drove past him. Every single one had their off-duty light on. The 8th cab slowed down. The driver looked at Whitmore's face, then hit the gas and kept going. Whitmore's office was on the 11th floor of a building on Park Avenue. He walked into the lobby at 3 o'clock, his feet already aching, his $1,000 suit wrinkled and damp. He headed for the elevator. Samuel, the same operator who worked the Carlton Arms before Marcus Webb became manager, stood inside the elevator cage. He saw Whitmore coming, pulled the gate closed, hit the button. The elevator rose without Whitmore inside it. "Hey, what the hell are you doing?" Samuel did not answer, did not look down, just kept rising. Whitmore stood in the lobby staring at the elevator shaft, breathing hard, his mind finally starting to connect the pieces, but still refusing to believe what the pattern was telling him. He looked at the stairs. 11 floors. He started climbing. By the time he reached the 11th floor, his legs were shaking and his lungs burned and his shirt was soaked through. He pushed open the door to his law firm, a practice he had built over 15 years, a place where his name was on the door in gold letters. The receptionist, a white woman named Helen who had worked there for 9 years, looked up when he walked in. "Mr. Whitmore, Mr. Castellano wants to see you immediately." Vincent Castellano was the senior partner, a man who had made his fortune defending mobsters and corrupt politicians, a man who understood that reputation was worth more than money, because reputation brought money, and losing reputation meant losing everything. He sat behind his desk when Whitmore walked in, his face showing nothing, his hands folded on top of a stack of papers. "Sit down, Richard." Whitmore sat, his shirt stuck to the chair. "Vincent, something strange is happening. I think someone is organizing something against me." "I know exactly what is happening. 16 clients called today. 16. All of them canceling their contracts, all of them giving the same reason. They do not want to be associated with this firm as long as you work here." Whitmore's stomach dropped. "That is insane. Who are these clients?" Meyer Lansky, Frank Costello, Albert Anastasia. 3 union presidents, 2 city councilmen, a state senator. The rest are businessmen who depend on good relations with the unions and with Harlem. Every single one of them told me the same thing. "What you said in court this morning is bad for business. You make them look bad. You make this firm look bad. And they are not going to pay legal fees to a firm that employs someone who calls people monkeys in open court." I was making a legal argument. I was discrediting a witness. You were being a stupid bigot in front of reporters who wrote down every word. And now the Brotherhood has blacklisted you. Every porter, every waiter, every cabbie, every elevator operator in this city has been told not to serve you. You are poison, Richard. And poison does not get to stay in this office. Whitmore's hands gripped the armrests. "You are firing me? Vincent, I have brought in millions of dollars to this firm. You brought in millions yesterday. Today you are costing me clients I cannot afford to lose. Today you are making my phone ring with mobsters telling me they will take their business elsewhere if your name stays on my door. Today you are a liability I am cutting loose before it sinks the whole ship. This is illegal, wrongful termination. I will sue. Sue who? Me? Good luck finding a lawyer who will take your case. Sue the Brotherhood. Good luck proving they did anything except exercise their right not to serve someone they find objectionable. Sue the clients who fired us. They have lawyers better than you ever were. You have no case, Richard. You have no job. And as of right now, you have 30 minutes to pack your office and get out of this building before security removes you. Whitmore sat there feeling the room tilt. Vincent, please. I have been with this firm for 12 years. And in 4 hours you burned all 12 years to ash. Now get out. Whitmore stood up, walked to his office, packed his diplomas, his books, his plaques into a cardboard box. At 7:30 he walked out of the building carrying everything that mattered from 15 years of practicing law, and the doorman who usually held the door for him stood there with his arms crossed and let the door close in Whitmore's face. He went home. His wife Margaret was sitting in the living room when he walked in, her suitcase already packed by the door. She looked at him with the expression of a woman who had spent the afternoon getting phone calls from friends telling her what her husband had said in court. Friends telling her they could not be seen with her anymore. Friends telling her she needed to choose between her social life and her marriage. I am going to my sister's house. Do not call me. Margaret, let me explain. There is nothing to explain. I heard what you said. Everyone heard. And I am not going to be married to a man who gets blacklisted by the entire city because he could not keep his mouth shut. She picked up her suitcase, walked out, did not look back. Whitmore stood in his living room alone. 11 hours ago he had been a successful lawyer with a corner office and a wife and clients lining up to pay him. Now he had a cardboard box and an empty apartment and a phone that would not stop ringing with people calling to tell him they wanted nothing to do with him anymore. Money does not save you when an entire city turns its back. Money does not buy you a cab when every driver has been told you do not exist. Money does not get you a table at a restaurant when every waiter would rather lose a tip than serve you. Money is just paper, and paper burns fast when 42,000 people decide to light the match. 2 weeks after the courtroom, Whitmore left Manhattan with everything he owned packed into 2 suitcases and a briefcase that felt lighter every day because the business cards inside were becoming worthless. He went to Boston first. Had connections there. A law school classmate who ran a decent practice, a judge he had done favors for, 3 firms that had tried to recruit him back when his name still opened doors instead of slamming them shut. He called his classmate from a payphone outside South Station. "Jim, it is Richard Whitmore. I am in town. I need to talk about opportunities." Silence on the other end. Then, "I heard what happened in New York. I cannot help you, Richard. I am sorry." "Jim, we have known each other for 20 years, and I need to work in this city for another 20. The Brotherhood has chapters here. The NAACP has an office 2 blocks from mine. You are radioactive. Goodbye." Click. He tried the judge. Got his secretary. She said the judge was unavailable. He called back 3 times. She hung up on him twice. The 3rd time she said if he called again she would have him arrested for harassment. He walked into a firm on Tremont Street, made it past the receptionist because she was new and did not recognize his face. Got into the senior partner's office. The partner, a man named Gerald Hutchins, looked up from his desk and his face went white. "You need to leave. Right now. I just want 5 minutes to discuss employment." "Mr. Whitmore, 3 of my partners are Jewish. 2 of my associates are colored. My secretary's husband is a union organizer. If anyone in this building finds out you were in my office, I lose half my staff and probably some clients. Get out before someone sees you." Whitmore left Boston the next day. Went to Vermont. Quieter, smaller legal market. Fewer people who cared about what happened in a Manhattan courtroom. He found work at an insurance company in Burlington doing contract review for $18,000 a year, a quarter of what he made in New York. The kind of work paralegals did, the kind of work that involved sitting in a windowless office reading policies and stamping forms, and never seeing a courtroom again. He thought distance would save him, thought Vermont was far enough from New York that the blacklist would not follow. He was wrong. 3 months into the job, he walked into a diner for lunch. The waitress saw him, walked into the back, did not come out. The cook came out instead, stood in the doorway with his arms crossed. "We do not serve you here. How do you even know who I am?" Brotherhood sent a bulletin, your picture, your name, what you said. Every union hall in 60 cities has it posted. You are not welcome here. You are not welcome anywhere. Whitmore left the diner, tried another place down the street, same thing, tried a hotel restaurant. The manager came out and told him to leave before he called the police for trespassing. Whitmore started eating at home, started driving an hour out of town to buy groceries where nobody knew his face, started living like a man in witness protection, except he was not being protected from anything. He was being erased. Back in New York, something happened that had never happened before in the history of organized crime. Vincent Gigante, a capo in the Genovese family, a man who had ordered hits on judges and politicians and rival mobsters, a man who pretended to be insane so the FBI could not prosecute him, sat down and wrote a letter. Not a threat, not a demand, an apology. The letter arrived at Bumpy's apartment on a Tuesday afternoon, hand-delivered by a driver who worked for the Genovese family, a man who knocked on the door, handed the envelope to Francine, and left without saying a word. Bumpy opened it at his kitchen table, read it twice, then read it out loud to Francine because he wanted to hear the words spoken to make sure he was not imagining them. "Mr. Johnson, I am writing to apologize on behalf of certain business interests for the disrespect shown to you in court 2 months ago. Mr. Whitmore's comments were inappropriate and do not reflect the views of our organization. We have severed all professional relationships with him and his former firm. We recognize your position in this city and the respect you command. We hope this matter can be considered closed. With regards, Vincent Gigante." Francine stared at him. "The Mafia just apologized to you." "Not just apologized. Gigante put it in writing, signed his name. That is evidence. That is leverage. That is something that could be used against him in court if the feds ever got their hands on it. And he did it anyway, because pissing me off was worse than the risk." "What does that mean?" "It means we won. Not just against Whitmore, against the system that protected him. When the Italian Mafia, the people who run half this city, decide they need to apologize to a black man from Harlem for something a white lawyer said, that means the power structure just shifted. That means they understand who actually controls the streets. That means every mobster in New York just got a lesson in who to respect and who to throw away." Bumpy folded the letter, put it in a drawer, lit a cigarette. Whitmore thought he had power because he wore a suit and worked in a courtroom. Gigante knows real power is not where you work. It is how many people will walk away from their paycheck to support you when someone disrespects you. That is the difference between authority and power. Authority comes from a title, power comes from people. The letter got around. Not the exact words, but the fact of it. The fact that Vincent Gigante, a man who communicated through nods and gestures and violent silence, had written an apology and signed his name. Within a month, every mobster in New York knew. Within 3 months, mobsters in Chicago and Philly and Boston knew. The story became legend. The story became proof that Bumpy Johnson's reach was longer than anyone thought. That insulting him did not just get you blacklisted in Harlem, but blacklisted everywhere. That even the Mafia understood there were lines you did not cross if you wanted to keep operating in this city. When even the Mafia apologizes, you understand who really holds power. Not the judges, not the prosecutors, not the lawyers who think words have no consequences. The power belongs to the people who can make an entire city forget you exist. And Bumpy Johnson had just proven he controlled that power better than anyone alive. Whitmore died in 1973 in a Veterans Administration hospital in White River Junction, Vermont. Heart attack. 61 years old. The funeral had 9 people. His ex-wife did not come. His daughter came but left before the service ended. The rest were hospital staff who attended out of obligation, people who knew his name from the chart on his door but knew nothing about the man, except that he had been a lawyer once and was not anymore. No flowers. No eulogies. The priest read generic verses about forgiveness and eternal rest. Words that meant nothing because nobody in that room gave a damn whether Richard Whitmore found peace or burned forever. They buried him in a plot he had paid for himself. No headstone, just a flat marker with his name and 2 dates. And by the time the groundskeeper filled in the dirt, everyone had already left. Bumpy Johnson died in 1968 in the arms of a woman who loved him, in a city that remembered his name like scripture. The funeral procession stretched 12 blocks, 7,000 people, every race, every neighborhood. Store owners closed their shops voluntarily, not because anyone told them to, but because showing respect for Bumpy meant more than a day's profit. The New York Times sent reporters. The Amsterdam News ran a front-page story with a photograph of the casket surrounded by flowers stacked 6 feet high. A. Philip Randolph stood at the pulpit and spoke for 20 minutes about what Bumpy had built. Not with violence, but with organization. Not with threats, but with the understanding that real power came from people who trusted you enough to risk their livelihoods when you asked. This man taught us that unity is not a slogan, it is a weapon. And when 40,000 people move together, no courthouse, no judge, no lawyer, no system built on hate can stand against it. 2 men, 2 funerals, 2 legacies, one remembered by thousands, one forgotten by everyone except the people paid to bury him. 3 months after Whitmore got run out of the city, Judge Harrison came up for re-election. He had been on the bench 18 years, never had serious opposition, always won with 70% of the vote. This time he lost, 53 to 47. The Brotherhood and every black church ran voter registration drives that put 3,000 new voters on the rolls, and every single one showed up on Election Day with one goal: remove the judge who sat silent while a lawyer called a man a monkey. Harrison gave a concession speech that lasted 90 seconds. Did not mention race, did not mention Whitmore, did not acknowledge what had beaten him. Just said he respected the will of the voters and wished his successor well. But everyone in that courthouse understood. Judges were not supposed to lose elections. But 42,000 people had just proven that when you give them a reason to pay attention, they can end careers that looked bulletproof. Douglas Mitchell, the prosecutor who had looked down at his papers while Whitmore spoke, held a press conference 6 months later, stood in front of City Hall and read a statement his lawyers probably wrote, but that he delivered in his own voice because not delivering it would have been worse. I was present in court on March 15th when inappropriate comments were made by defense counsel. I did not object. I did not speak. I remained silent when I should have acted. That silence was cowardice. I apologized to Mr. Johnson, to the community of Harlem, and to everyone who expects better from their public servants. I failed. I am sorry. First time in New York history, a sitting prosecutor publicly apologized to a defendant. Mitchell's career survived, barely. He never ran for higher office, never got the federal appointment everyone thought was coming. Just served out his term and retired quietly. And every time someone mentioned his name in legal circles, someone else would bring up the apology, and the room would go quiet. The black press became legend after Whitmore. The Amsterdam News circulation doubled. The Pittsburgh Courier started a New York edition. The Chicago Defender opened a Harlem bureau. White newspapers had ignored the story completely, never printed a word about what Whitmore said or what happened after. But black papers covered every detail, every restaurant that refused him, every cab that drove past, every door that closed in his face. And people who read those papers understood. Information was power. Documentation was power. Recording what happened and making sure everyone knew was more powerful than any gun. They started calling it the Whitmore Effect. Not revenge, not punishment, just the understanding that certain actions had certain consequences, and those consequences did not require violence or threats or broken bones. All it required was 42,000 people deciding you no longer existed and sticking to that decision until you disappeared completely. No bullets, no bombs, no bodies in the river. Just social erasure so complete that a man could walk through a city of 8 million people and be more alone than if he had been stranded on a deserted island. That was the new weapon. That was the lesson. That was what every bigot learned from watching Richard Whitmore get deleted from New York like he never existed. Bumpy sat in his apartment 6 months after the courtroom and told Francine something that got repeated in Harlem for the next 50 years. Something that became the philosophy of every civil rights organizer who understood that boycotts worked better than riots, that economic pressure worked better than violence, that unity was the only weapon that could not be taken away. Real power does not come from how many people you can hurt. It comes from how many people will stand beside you when the whole world tries to break you. Whitmore thought he had power because he had a law degree and a courtroom and a system that protected him. But when 42,000 people decided he did not exist anymore, all that power turned to smoke. That is the difference between authority and power. Authority is given, power is earned. And once you earn it, nobody can take it away. The Whitmore Effect lasted decades. Union organizers taught it. Churches preached it. Parents told their children about it as proof that fighting back did not always mean throwing punches. It meant organizing. It meant moving together. It meant understanding that a community acting in unison could bring down systems that looked permanent, could end careers that looked untouchable, could make the powerful beg for forgiveness from people they had spent their whole lives treating like they were nothing. History does not remember the men who hide behind authority. It remembers the men who built power from the ground up and used it to rewrite the rules. Whitmore died alone. Bumpy died, surrounded by thousands who knew his name would outlive every judge, every prosecutor, every lawyer who thought the system would protect them forever. This story is shared for historical insight and personal reflection, not to promote violence or illegal behavior. Thank you for watching until the end. These stories take weeks of research and writing to create. If this resonated with you, if you see the lesson Bumpy Johnson was teaching about accountability and education over violence, hit that subscribe button. Help us reach 1 million subscribers so we can keep telling stories that matter. Stories about power used wisely. Stories about consequences faced honestly. Stories about men who chose to change systems instead of just destroying enemies. Next video drops soon. Until then, remember, real power is not what you can destroy. It is what you choose to build.